Happy Friday, Hokie Nation. It's the video edition of the Friday Q&A once again. Before we get into things, if you want your comments or questions to be involved in future episodes, feel free to drop them in the comments section down below. Before we get into things, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, where exceptional customer service comes first. First Bank and Trust Company offers a variety of checking and saving account options that are sure to meet your banking needs, including free checking. Visit firstbank.com to find the account that's right for you. Well, it's your usual cast here, so introductions are in order. As always, I'm Robert Bateman, joined alongside by Chris Coleman, and behind the scenes, it's Nick Brown. You ready to get into things?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, so our first question comes from Down Jersey Hokie, who wants to know, with increased scholarship limit, how many O and D linemen would you take every year?
Yeah, I've always thought for a while that Virginia Tech doesn't take enough offensive linemen. I think they only took a combined 5 in their last 2 recruiting classes, and that's just not enough, considering it's a very difficult position to evaluate. I would take at least 2 more per year than they currently take. I know it would lead to more attrition, but there's a lot of attrition these days anyway. It's 2025, man. I think you get them in there and let them compete. And I think you can get a hometown discount on guys if you develop them within your program, as opposed to going out there if you have to get in the portal. Oh, I need a proven offensive tackle in the portal. Well, that's $1 million, right? Maybe even more these days. But if you recruit them out of high school and develop them, you can keep them for a little bit cheaper than you would have to go in the open market and get them for. So I think it's smart to sign bigger high school offensive line classes these days. Flip into the defensive side of the ball. I don't think it's much of an issue with your defensive end / edge players. I think there's enough of those to go around. They're a little bit easier to find because they're not as big. And also, you can move some linebackers to edge because they have similar body styles. If they're not working out at linebacker, or maybe put them in a position that's a little bit less mentally taxing, which would be the edge spot. Defensive tackle, again, it's a bigger position, not quite as big as offensive line generally, but certainly bigger than edge. So, you could make an argument that maybe you should sign a few more of those out of high school. So if I'm going to sign at least two more offensive linemen per year out of high school, maybe one more defensive tackle, I think that could work.
I'm curious your thoughts. So my dad always says that you can never have enough O linemen, and I'm just curious if you feel the same way.
Absolutely. I think, Virginia Tech was looking at this kid from Appalachian State who's a 2-year starter there, very experienced player. Also has one of the worst PFF grades in the country for offensive linemen. Has not been a good player really, and he had one game where he had a 0.0 pass blocking grade. It's not good, right? Well, this kid winds up at Oklahoma State because there's just not that many good offensive linemen to go around. Like, you're not going to have a good backup left tackle, most likely. Hardly anybody has a good backup left tackle. Those 2 or 3 years under Vance Vice, where Virginia Tech had a ton of depth on the offensive line, that's the exception and not the rule. So, yeah, you can never have enough offensive linemen, and everybody can say that. Everybody can say that. That's why they're so expensive in the portal, which is why I think you need to develop them out of high school.
All right. Well, our next question comes from Gus DeMann, who wants to know, is revenue distribution allowed to be pay for play? That is, can the amount paid to each player from revenue distribution be allocated postseason based on snaps played? Fantasy points earned, conference national championships, accolades, etc. Me and my buddy were talking about a model like that yesterday where every player gets X amount and the rest is distributed based on playing time / production.
I'm sure if you wanted to set it up like that, you could. Now, that being said, let's say you're Virginia Tech and you're recruiting against UNC for a starting cornerback, and UNC's offered him $500,000, and Virginia Tech comes in and says, well, we'll give you $300,000, but if we make a bowl game, you're second team all conference player, you get this many interceptions, then you'll get $500,000. What are you going to do if you're that player? You're going to take the guaranteed $500,000. Right?
Well, yeah, I would for sure.
Yeah, right. And now Virginia Tech could also say, well, we'll pay you $500,000 also, and then you'll get these incentives if you go above that. But remember, you've got a $20.5 million cap. So you would have to spend less of that to make up just in case all your bonuses hit, right? So I don't think it's a good idea. I think in theory, yes, it's a good idea, but because that cap is there, you want to be able to spend all of that money up front, in my opinion, to put yourself in the best positions. I don't think incentives gets guys here these days. I think they want the guaranteed money, and I don't really blame them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it works in the pro leagues because like those guys know they have their contract, they want to get the extra boost. But
exactly right. So like if I'm that cornerback, I'm like, well, cool, I get a $50,000 bowl bonus. That's great. And maybe here's an extra 25 if you win the bowl. Well, what if all my teammates opt out? Then I know we're not going to win the bowl, so I can count that 25 grand off of what I'm going to get. So it's better to just give them the guaranteed money up front, in my opinion.
All right. Well, our last question, we move from the gridiron to the hardwood, and Hokie Hill 1117 wants to know if you had to define a successful turnaround for football and men's basketball next season, what does that look like? Which team do you have more confidence in accomplishing it?
I think Mike Young's done a good job with what he's had. I think his resources have been increased tremendously this year. I think he's a proven good basketball coach. He got the best assistant coach on the market, in my opinion, in Chester Frazier. He's already improved his point guard and his center positions. He's brought in a basketball GM who used to be Will Wade's director of basketball operation at LSU. So this guy has an understanding of market value if you followed Will Wade's career, right? So I think Mike Young has done a great job this offseason fine-tuning his staff, making it more modern, and he's got more resources to work with this year. That's going to be a better basketball team next year, no question in my mind. I can't assess expectations on them until I see what the final roster is going to look like, but I expect they'll be improved at every single position, and we'll get back to more traditional. Like at the end of the season, you'll be able to look at that team and say, yeah, that was a well-coached team, and I'm happy to say that was my basketball team this year. Like it's not going to be an embarrassing product or anything like that. I'm actually have more confidence in the basketball team, having a good, solid winning record next year than I do the football team. I do think it's easier to rebuild a basketball team in a short amount of time because you're dealing with fewer players. I think Brent Pry has upgraded his coaching staff. But again, I think it's a little bit harder to turn around a football program in a short amount of time. Not that it can't be done, because Duke has done it, obviously, and if Indiana's done it, so it certainly can be done. What worries me is does the personnel on offense fit with the offensive coordinator? And even if you answer all those questions positively, you still get down to the simple fact that Virginia Tech has been terrible under one-score games, and they need to have better in-game leadership. I think for me to feel good about the football program, they need to finish with a winning record in the regular season. And you get to the end of the year and you're like, okay, this team made progress. I like this coaching staff now. They seem to be going in the right direction. I said last year I wasn't going to put a number on what I expected them to do. I was going to say, well, I'll tell you at the end of the season how I feel. And I'm going to base my judgment based on how they make me feel, not looking at some sheet of paper to see what their record or ranking was and anything like that. And they did not make me feel good last year. But the thing is, football, they've kind of backed themselves into a corner where, the longer you get into a tenure, the more pressure there is. Like, if they go 6-6 this year, well, that would have been fine 2 years ago and was considered good 2 years ago. I don't know if 6-6 3 years in a row is going to fire up the fan base. In fact, I think it would probably do the opposite. So I think it's very important that they finish with a winning record this year, and the fan base at the end of the season feel like, okay, we're heading in the right direction.
Well, that's all we got for you this week on the TSL Friday Q&A. Thank you guys for your suggestions. If you want to be featured on a future video, drop some questions down in the comment section below. As always, be sure to check out the actual Friday Q&A article on techsideline.com. For our producer, Nick Brown behind the scenes, Chris Coleman on set, I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you guys next week.